This was you. You guys voted for this. Don't make me take these privileges away from you guys. Hello, welcome back to Crushing Sounds. My name is Chris, and today I'm looking at the 6th studio album by Black Veil Brides, titled The Phantom Tomorrow. So, Black Veil Brides, do they even need an introduction at this point? I'm sure most people will have heard of this band, or at least remember them from when they were at their biggest, we should say. Formed in Ohio by vocalist and only original member Andy Biersack in 2006. And they released their debut album We Stitch These Wounds in 2009, and with that they kind of exploded overnight, with that album selling nearly 11,000 copies in its first week. And I remember when their second album, Set the World on Fire, dropped in 2011, they seemingly became one of the most talked about bands in rock music, be it positively or negatively. I actually remember those first two albums really well. I was 14 or 15 when Set the World on Fire dropped, and I guess it was the right place at the right time. Those repeated lines about being an outcast, standing up for yourself, not caring that you don't fit in, I guess something about that really hooked me at that time in my life. I think how young people were taken by the striking, don't give a fuck attitude and appearance of bands like Motley Crue or Kiss is kind of what happened to me and a lot of young people when they first discovered Black Veil Brides around this time. That also, however, is of course what I'm sure most people are most aware of when they think of Black Veil Brides, and that was the insane amount of ridicule thrown at this band and their fans, with many people finding the look and subject matter extremely cheesy. They sort of became the new Nickelback, I suppose. It became the thing to hate on this band, whether you listen to their music or not, and for the record, I never joined in that kind of bandwagon. I, for example, don't like Nickelback at all, but that's because I think their music is trash. I don't see the point in hating on a band just because the thing to do is to hate them. That feels very shallow to me. It could be argued, however, that a large part of this band's success came from all this. Black Veil Brides were the new love them or hate them band. Around the third album, at the height of their fame, the band sold over 40,000 copies of their third album in its first week of release. What the fuck? They had accolades and awards up the backside, and a legion of fans, as well as a legion of people hating on them. Fast forward to today, I don't hear nearly as much discussion around the band from either end of the spectrum, really. As the attention moved on to other bands after their third album, Black Veil Brides have become one of those bands where you go, I didn't know they were still a thing. Sorry for rambling there, I just find it interesting to look back at how this was one of the most talked about bands in the genre at the time, and now you rarely hear them brought up. I just find that interesting, how fickle sometimes our mainstream attention can be, but whatever. It is weird though, because while I remember really liking this band as a teenager, it must have been for a really short period of time, because I never checked anything out past album number 2. Their third album was only 2 years later, so for whatever reason, I moved on from this band really, really quickly. I guess I was still jumping around rock and metal at the time, trying to find my niche, as it were, because I was quite new to the scene. And I also have never been nostalgic and gone back to those two albums. I still enjoy going back to bands I loved in my youth, like Rise Against, Slipknot, that kind of thing. But I can't remember the last time I listened to either of the first two Black Veil Brides albums. Heck, the only reason I heard their previous album, Veil, was because I reviewed that album back in the day. It was when I was only uploading videos to our Facebook page, and it was a dual review, which I covered that album and Machine Head's album, Catharsis. So that was a miserable week, I can tell you that much. Don't watch that review, or any of the reviews I put up on Facebook. They are all absolutely terrible. Just take my word for it, I didn't really enjoy Veil, and the less said about Machine Head's Catharsis, the better. But to cut a long story short, we have arrived at the new album, The Phantom Tomorrow. You guys voted for this, you wanted me to share my thoughts, so off we go. So from what I've researched, this album is supposed to be a concept album, and the band intend to release supplementary material to go along with the album, which is neat, I guess, if you enjoy what you hear and want to get more out of it. Apparently they've done that kind of thing before. I think it was on album number 3. I wouldn't know, but apparently the band like to do this kind of thing. Yeah, that sounds pretty good to me. So with that, the intro to the album is this epic, almost film score-esque build-up, which Okay, fair enough. The band playing to the kind of thing I like there. I like symphonic stuff, I like epic stuff, so they've got me on board right from the off, so fair play. It then boots off into the already released Scarlet Cross. I think that song came out about a year ago by this point, so better late than never, I suppose. And right from the word go, we get the one thing I will give this album a decent amount of credit for. The riff writing is actually pretty top notch. I might have said this in the Veil review, I can't remember, and I don't fancy watching that video again, but despite your thoughts on the vocals, lyrics, aesthetics, themes, all of that kind of stuff, Jinx, and especially Jake Pitts, are no slouches on the guitar. They're really not. Also, the opening riff of Scarlet Cross, would I be offending anyone if I said it reminds me a little bit of Ghost? I mean that in a good way. I love Ghost, and this riffing reminds me a lot of the quality riffs that Ghost write, so that's a really good start. But I guess I've beaten around the bush enough already. How are the lyrics and the vocals? But to be fair, on Scarlet Cross, they aren't that bad. They're a bit generic, sure, but nowhere near as cringy as people probably remember from albums past. Then we get the second track, Born Again, and get a load of this verse. The blood runs over me, but not the cavalry. I am alone in everything I see, do you believe? The thunder sounds and I hear the call. The underground is the fire below my enemies, and I can never seem to get up to find the hope. So this isn't the first time on the album I queried, what are you talking about? On the whole, the lyrics either sound like that, completely nonsensical gibberish, or they are dreadfully one-dimensional. Later on in the same song, we get this little gem. Look behind the curtain, take on your burden. It's really forced rhyming. It's that really elementary forced rhyming thing that you get when you're a really new songwriter, and the fact they're still writing these kind of lyrics at album 6. I don't know if it's laziness or they're just playing into what they're known for, but they don't read along the lyrics as you listen to the album, because it's seriously distracting as all hell, because the lyrics are not very good at all. I couldn't find from my research whether the lyrics were written by Andy or from other members of the band. All the songwriting credits I could find reference the whole band rather than specific members, so I can't say who it is. So it's either one person writing all the lyrics who's got very little imagination and skill at doing this, or they're designed by committee. I suspect it's probably the latter. Then again, as I say, they are kind of known for these generic themes, so why change it now, I guess, at this stage in their career. However, if this is supposed to be a concept album, or have any sort of narrative running through it at all, more power to you if you can figure out what it is. Everything being so generic makes it impossible for me to figure out any sort of narrative going on in this thing, and the lyrics just don't get any better. Scarlet Cross is the very weird exception to the fact that the lyrics in there aren't that bad, but they're pretty dreadful throughout the whole album. Here's another example I wrote down from a track way later called The Wicked One. Made your bed in darkness with your eyes wide shut, a million fact omissions and a sneering trust. I'll repeat, what are you talking about? So we go from one issue to another. So you know how I hate noise-based intros that lead seamlessly into the actual opening track? Well, how about a minute interlude, they've actually called it interlude, where a violin, I think, some sort of string instrument, plays the melody of the previous song Blackbird. It doesn't lead out from Blackbird, and it doesn't lead into the next song, Torch. It's just utterly pointless. Why is it in here? Remove that 1.5 minute song from the album. It's utterly pointless. Torch, to be fair for a moment, there are background orchestral elements which make the song a bit more epic than the songs that have come before. They do sound a little bit artificial though, so this is no ad infinitum or anything as epic as that, but it is something. It represents a bit of a tonal shift in the album, because everything up to this point has felt quite repetitive, and regrettably it falls right back into that same generic formula after this song. Shadow Rise stands out for its violin intro. That's it, I guess. Crimson Sky stands out for having the heaviest guitar riffing on the album right at the start, then a generic, almost pop-punk sounding chorus. It's like the rhythm just reminds me so much of pop-punk. However, it then, ironically, does also showcase the first time, and I think only time on the album, where Andy does a harsh vocal scream on the album, 10 tracks in to the album. It's so brief and so late in the game, I wonder why it's been put in there. It's better than his scream used to sound on We Stitch These Wounds, I suppose, but it's just a weird addition to the song. I really don't understand it. Andy's vocal performance, I think, is a really big culprit as to why this album feels so repetitive. He seemingly only has two different singing registers, either that really low monotone singing, which has been mocked to hell and back, you'll either like that or you won't, or that mid-range chanty, belty thing he does for every single chorus. I've read some people criticise him for having only one octave range. I wouldn't know if that's true, I'm not an expert on vocals, but there definitely isn't much variety in his singing. I don't think it sounds bad, to be fair. He doesn't sound like he's straining when he's going for his highest notes. He's definitely comfortable in these registers, which is fair enough. It just doesn't really go anywhere. Every song has him doing the exact same things, so there's not a lot of dynamics to his voice at all. So it just makes every song feel kind of the same thing, really. There is so little to talk about when you're looking at each specific song. There are some slightly different things going on sporadically here and there, like the epic feel of Torch, or the slightly heavier moments on Crimson Skies, but this album shows its cards very early, and it doesn't do much of anything to keep it interesting throughout the whole runtime. With two exceptions, all the songs are also very similar in length, they go through very similar structures, and I've already mentioned the repetitive as hell vocal delivery. I will be fair though, there isn't anything strictly speaking bad about the album, apart from the lyrics, but you know, that's part of the course, really. All the jeering that was thrown at the band back in the day probably shouldn't be applied to this album. The riffing, as I said, is genuinely done to a decent standard, and these choruses are obviously very catchy and designed to be sung live with a big crowd, so in that sense, they fulfill their purpose, they are what they are trying to be. I just find it all a little bit shallow. And the closing track, Fall Eternal, does feel suitably epic for a closing track, which is something I always like to hear, so fair enough in that respect as well. But all of this is just so formulaic. I used the phrase one-dimensional earlier when I was talking about the lyrics, but I think you could use that just to describe this album as a whole. It's all dreadfully one-dimensional. I'm sure when I put this up as a voting option, you were all hoping for a review where I really tear into a terrible album. To be honest, I was kind of expecting that would be the case when I heard this, so sorry I'm not getting all enraged or hyperbolic about the new Black Veil Brides album, but it's not bad, but it certainly isn't great either. It's harmless, chanty rock at best, boring at worst. It's better than anything Motionless in White have put out, ever, and it's better than the last Bullet for My Valentine album. We'll see about the new Bullet for My Valentine album, though. But yeah, I'd be surprised if anyone considers this a memorable album in a month. So thank you all for watching. I enjoy putting up these voting polls on my Instagram page, so if you want to get involved in what stuff we cover in future videos, feel free to follow us on our Instagram page, and it goes up on our Facebook as well. So thank you all for watching, thanks for supporting the channel, hope you enjoyed the interview that Ruben did. How fucking good was that? Thanks for watching, thanks for the support, go listen to some amazing heavy metal, and I'll see you in the next video.